Well, Laura, thanks for making time today. I think this is our third. I think third time is a charm. I think this is our third time rescheduling this.
Yes.
Don't sound so enthusiastic all at once. Um, so I will. I'm going to wish you an early July 4th. Um, can you believe that next year is the 250th anniversary of the country?
It is amazing that that's happening.
I don't
Yeah,
know. Time's gone.
I don't know. I still do remember the 200th.
The 200th.
Yeah,
The Bicentennial,
that's right.
76.
Yeah,
That was
yep.
well that maybe
1976.
I was uh I was 5.
But you
I don't
remember
know.
it, right?
I don't really remember it though. And I'm outside and I lived outside Philadelphia, so which where it would have
Wow.
been pretty big. But anyway, um so this podcast, this interview is about you. It's not about any particular topic, though. We are welcome to go on tangents and go in whatever direction our interests and our mutual interests lie. But let's. I want to learn more about you. I know a certain amount, a limited amount, and we're going to start from the beginning. And so, tell me a little bit about where you grew up. Um, Maybe a little bit about your family. Were you an only child, siblings, and take me through college. Take me where'd you go to school? What'd you study? Or were you like an aspiring pianist when you were 10?
Well, Bob, there's a lot there. Yes. Well, thank you for the question, and this is going to be fun. The first place that I lived was in Mississippi, and most people would never in a million years guess that because
You don't have an accent any
I
longer.
don't have a Mississippi accent. But I grew up in a Navy family. My father was a naval officer, and at the time that I was born, the Navy was subsidizing his education, so he went to the University of Mississippi, and that's where I was born. And then in my childhood, we moved from Mississippi to Monterey, California, and then over to Florida for a few years, then up to Maine, then to
So
rural.
can I ask what period of years your father was in the Navy?
Yeah, he was in the Navy up until I believe it was 1972.
So did he, and was he a career Navy?
That's wrong. Well,
If,
I don't have that number in my head, but maybe a little
okay.
bit later than that, but in the
So did
70s.
he, I guess, well, I don't know how much the Navy was involved in the Korean War, but I don't know if that would have been during his
Yeah.
time and then early days of Vietnam.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And, as with a lot of veterans, he didn't talk about this a lot when we were growing up, but he was in the middle of his exciting career pioneering the use of P-3 aircraft and all that. We heard a lot about that, but not about his beginnings until
Hmm.
more recently. And actually, he joined the Navy during World War II, but they were winding it down. And so he was lucky to get a pilot's
He
commission
joined the
and
Navy
education.
during World War II.
Yes, at the tail end.
Okay,
That's
wow.
right.
So your father was born in I guess around 1920ish, 20s,
Yeah,
1920 or
28.
so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
Um,
yeah, so he was much older than I am. That's one thing. He also, so he got in. He was in the Korean War, and his job there was flying planes back and forth between Japan and Korea,
wow.
uh, carrying cargo and people and admirals and generals. And there were quite a lot of stories there. It was a very dangerous mission, as you can imagine. And there was even one incident where he was in a plane crash in Japan that threw him and all of his cargo out of the plane. And it is just amazing that he survived that.
Wow. And is your father still alive?
Now, he recently passed away. He lived
Okay.
a very long life and continued to be inventive and dynamic and really a hard charger all his life.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to hear. I uh, I don't know. Well, and you said you didn't learn too much uh, about his early time until recently.
That's
Um,
right. I'd say in the last 10 years, he talked about it a lot more and wrote down stories for us. So thank goodness that was preserved. And also, he was given an honor flight from Utah. So he was honored in that way as a Korean War veteran.
wow.
So
Has he? Have
a
you
lot of
ever
the,
seen? Has he? Did he ever see the Korean War Memorial here in
yes,
DC?
he saw it. Yes. That
Okay.
the honor flights take them to the memorials in DC.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's really. And so, well, thanks for sharing that. And so, did you have siblings? I'm sorry.
I did. So I had, yes, I had two brothers, one sister. I'm the oldest of the four. Also had a mom, and she was, had to be a
I was assuming mom was there somewhere,
Yeah, there were. I had a mom.
especially while your dad was away at the Korean War.
Well, there's that precedes their relationship, but uh, they got married, and he had a pilot's career, so he was deployed a lot, and she had the life of a Navy officer's wife, which meant she had to be in all these clubs and very community oriented. People were at our house all the time. We lived on Navy bases a lot of the time, which provided the social life. So that was a whole different world. And they did get divorced right around the time that he left the Navy.
Oh,
So
I'm
that
sorry.
started new chapters in all of our lives. But that though all of those things had influences on me, as you can imagine, the structure of the Navy, the dad being gone for long periods of time, all of his achievements and accomplishments, mom's community orientation, but also moving all the time had a huge impact on, I think, the choices that I made later on.
Did his time away and all that moving have a strain on their marriage?
Yes, I believe it did. I mean,
Okay.
I wasn't, I don't know exactly, can't describe exactly what made that happen, but it definitely put a strain on them and really on the family. And so I do feel for really for all military families where, either one of the parents is away for periods of time, and just their necessary devotion to their career, and it's a mission. It's not just a job. It takes your entire life while you're in it. And, I'm on the one hand proud of that, but I also know that it takes away from the family and family life.
Yeah. And do you stay close to both of them even after their divorce?
Yes. Yes.
And so, how many places did you live between? I guess being born in Mississippi and going to college.
I think I'm seven.
7. Wow, that's
Yeah.
a lot. That's an average of more
Every
than
couple of
every few
years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so we ended up as a family. My father took the kids. We moved with my dad to a suburb of Los Angeles, and so that's where I ended up moving in the middle of my senior year of high school, and that's where I ended up, applying for college and things like that. And my interest, by the time I was a senior in high school, I was really interested in art and psychology and mathematics and literature. Those were my favorite topics. I also did like physics. So I kind of had these, a split brain between art and culture and literature, and then math and physics. And I applied to a few colleges, and I did not choose the most elite one. I chose to go to Cal State Fullerton. And part
Okay.
of the reason was that I wanted to be an art major. And I also loved the Cal State system. They had multiple campuses. And, this habit of mine, at least still ingrained at that age, I wanted the flexibility to be able to move. And I actually did go to three different campuses
Oh
during
wow.
my education: Fullerton, San Francisco, and San Diego. And I
Okay.
graduated, came
And
back to Fullerton.
is Fullerton in the L.A. area?
Great question. Most people don't know. It's actually in Orange County.
Okay.
And it was at Fullerton that I started studying art. I really was seriously wanted to be a painter. I was an art major. And I also studied math on the side, but I was studying art. I wanted to be a
Wait, when
painter.
you say on the side, do you mean like as a minor or in the evenings
Yeah,
for fun?
no, it was part of my college education. So
Okay.
I was studying art and literature and math, all those things I was interested in. And but painting was my thing. That would be the thing that I came home and I would, if you saw my home today, you would see some paintings that I did back then, way back then.
Okay.
And I was constantly experimenting with different styles. I wanted to understand all the different styles. I was also kind of a wild child at the time, so I was experimenting in life as well. But I
So
tried.
what does that mean exactly? Are we talking
I was
Ashbury Heights in '69?
no, this no. This is decades, more than a decade later, in more of the punk rock scene in Los
Okay.
Angeles.
Oh,
Yeah,
like so X.
yeah. X and the Germs and the Weirdos and seeing all the early the what were going to be the 80s
Actually, that was
bands.
that must have been a fantastic time.
It was
I've watched some great documentaries. My wife and I are both kind of into the listening to early punk, and I've gotten to see X a couple of times, in the last few years. But I mean, that was just such a whether it was L.A. or New York was the place to be for that music scene.
absolutely. And I think what was attractive about it, certainly for a young person, but it still carries forward today, is just the energy. And also, they weren't just singing about rock and roll themes, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They were singing about, abstract art and film and politics and literature. I mean, all of that was in the canon of the early punk. And it was also sarcastic. There was a lot of, advanced placement humor in there as well. So it was fun. And of course, there were costumes.
There were what
Costumes.
costumes,
Yes. You
meaning.
you never went out without some sort of costume on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, you mean as a punk rock enthusiast, or just as being in that area during that time?
Oh no, I mean in the punk rock scene itself.
Okay.
So
Okay.
getting dressed to go to a show, even just as,
Right.
as an audience member, was a big deal.
I
And
would
there was
really
a
like
lot
to see
of
some photos of you from that era.
there aren't a lot, honestly. Not a very photographed era for me. But the I was an art major, and so and you see this today in people that do special effects and all that in the movies in Hollywood today. When they go to parties, Halloween parties, they go all out. Well, the punk rock scene was the same thing. People with those kinds of skills or just inclination or crafting inclinations would create by hand the wildest things. You'd see somebody come in with 50 safety pins on their dress, or I had an artist friend who her studio, she had something like 100 pairs of shoes nailed to the wall, and so she could choose her shoes off the wall, literally. And
I
we'd go,
with a
we'd
lot
have
of holes
fun.
in them, I guess. But
A lot of holes in them, and also thrift shop type of
right.
clothes. So it was a very creative scene. And all of that, when it got distilled into a more formulaic form of music, a lot of that kind of fun and artistry went away, at least for the audience. I think that the rock stars always have fun and creativity, but the audience became more regimented and even kind of dark later on, and so I kind of got out of the scene then.
Okay. And so you graduated after 4-year degree, I guess.
Yeah. And
And
I didn't graduate with a degree in painting because somewhere along the way I took a linguistics class because I was studying culture, learning about languages, and I was taking a basic course at the same time. And so I wrote a program to compose poems on computers using knowledge about syntax, which I was learning about in linguistics. And I got completely, totally, utterly hooked on computers.
so I got to ask you, what were you programming on at the time? That
So
was
that would
this
have
that
been
was this still mainframe VAX
no, no,
VMS?
no, no. I think it was a PDP 11 maybe that they had at the school, and
Okay.
running basic. That and I was not in computer science yet, but because of that, just getting hooked on that process of creating things and seeing the computer produce for you as a tool, I switched to computer science. So I pretty much ditched the art education at that time, went over to computer science, took it off math to add up to a minor in that, but I really focused on computer science.
Wait, so I got to ask you. So at what point during your college career did you make that switch?
This was probably about 2.5 years in.
Wow, that's kind of late to make
It
that
was,
decision.
yeah,
I'm
and I
not
was,
saying I'm not no not judgment or anything, but that's a hard switch at that point.
yeah, and it was, I was in there 5 years. I was
Okay,
in for 5 years.
well, that's okay. It took me
Yeah,
4.5 years. So
yeah, yeah. So and while I was still in college, I did get my first uh, programming job, and it was very, very exciting. And I'm being a little sarcastic, but it was for Interstate Electronics Corporation, and
Interstate Electronics Corporation.
yes,
And
it was a
was
company.
this a California industry?
Yes,
Interstate.
yes.
Okay.
Well, setting the context, Southern California was
This almost
still.
sounds like a Halt and Catch Fire early company.
It is. It is. Actually, the career of the protagonist in *Halt and Catch Fire*, I related to it a great deal. I definitely had a parallel career to hers. I just didn't become rich and famous.
Right. uh, okay. So sorry. So tell me a little bit about Interstate Electronics Corporation.
Yeah, that was just for a year, and it was part time. But what I was doing was writing programs for embedded chips that would go into oil rigs.
Oh wow. Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
so you
and
started that's pretty hardcore programming
I
embedded.
started doing hardcore. This was assembly language.
Oh God.
It was for a PDP-8 chip, which had only 8 instructions. And my first assignment was to program the machine to display letters of the alphabet on the screen. Which you think, oh God, that's so basic, but it was literally pixels in.
Not with only 8 instructions.
Yeah, and I had to draw the dots of the alphabet. So I used my art degree, right? I designed the little letters and the dots and then got it to display. That was my first assignment. My second assignment was to write a self diagnostic for the CPU so that with those 8 instructions, it would exercise that all 8 instructions in all parts of the memory were working.
Okay.
So that was my first job.
And that those embedded chips, those early chips, were they for what were they? They were running for an oil rig. So were
Yeah.
they being used in like a specialized piece of electronic equipment, or were they used in a traditional or an early stage PC at that point?
No, I think they were embedded. So I don't know how they managed to embed a PDP-8 CPU, but that's what they were doing. And
But it
this,
was for displaying letters. So was it using? I mean, was it displaying letters digitally in a digital display then of some sort
yeah,
for the? Okay,
yes, yeah. So
interesting.
Interstate Electronics Corporation was a largely defense and commercial electronics corporation, um, and they were they had the oil business, but a lot of it was also defense. So they created a lot of embedded computer based uh, gadgets for the
Do you know what?
defense
Do you know what
industry.
became of them, or were they? Did they get
They were
bought by somebody?
acquired. They were acquired a couple times. I think they still exist in some form inside of another company. I don't know which company now. It was a long
Okay.
time ago.
Okay. Well, no, but
But
it's interesting just to know, how did Raytheon become Raytheon, and
exactly,
through acquisition or McDonnell Douglas, well, not no longer with us, but those types of companies, Lockheed Martin.
exactly. So that's how I got started in my career. I was still in college, and at the time I had a friend in college. We worked a lot together, collaborated on school assignments, and it turns out that his dad had a company in Mountain View, California, which is in Silicon Valley, called National Nuclear Corporation. And we did some assignments with National Nuclear, and we thought we were so cool.
So we're gonna talk about the N word.
Yes, we are. We are nuclear. That's right. That's right.
Sorry,
This
it's very timely. So
It is. It is. And so National Nuclear was a very small firm with a big name, National Nuclear. It had been started by a couple of guys, one of them from MIT, and he was really borderline genius. He had worked for GE and nuclear power, developing nuclear power. And what they were doing was creating instrumentation really for quality assurance and safety in the nuclear power industry. And for anyone who saw the movie Silkwood, what happens there is the failure of safety programs, and people can be killed, and also nuclear reactors can malfunction if the fuel in them is not properly assembled. So what National Nuclear was doing was monitoring nuclear waste and also monitoring the quality of fuel rods that were going into the nuclear reactors. So I was hired as the software engineer for the company. My
Wow.
friend, my friend Luther Welsh, whose dad's name was also Luther Welsh.
Was that your title, the software engineer?
It was software engineer at first. I think I later added senior when I had a small team,
Okay.
because I was there for 5 years
Was this a
when
small company at the time?
it was a small company. I think there might have been 30 people,
Oh, wow.
and we were
Okay.
building all of the hardware, the electronics, and the software. And so there, one of my
And
first,
at the time, was that for particular reactors or for kind of the industry at large?
it was for the industry. That's actually a great question. They were marketing it to the entire nuclear, fuel and power industry, mainly the nuclear fuel manufacturers in the United States. So that's like Westinghouse, General Electric in the United States, but
Right.
also Germany, Italy, Japan. Uh, so, and later on, other countries as well. So I think my second assignment there, I went full time.
So just to, I mean, with what you just said,
Yes,
when you took this opportunity, was this? I mean, did you see this as like this is like an early startup, small company with a huge opportunity in front of it?
that is so interesting question, Bob, because I didn't see it that way at all. I was really just enchanted by the problems to be solved. I was attracted to the fact that I could have the entire machine to myself. I had my own PDP-11. I owned all of the everything about it. I didn't mean I owned it, but I had complete control. I learned everything about it, and I was able to design things for it and make the machines work uh, unencumbered. And if I wanted to work there all night long, I could. And aside from working with hardware engineers, there was nobody there to tell me you can't do this, you can't do that.
Right.
So
Well,
I
and
think it
I'm
was,
guessing that was a unique opportunity as a woman as well at that period.
yes, yes, I suppose it was. I had applied for other jobs and hadn't gotten them. So that was, that, but I really started here before I even had my computer science degree. And I think I just fell in love with the problems and the opportunity to be in charge
So
and to
you
solve
were
them.
in Mountain View,
Yes,
uh,
moved
really
to
quite well before the dot com era.
well before. Yeah.
And
So we're
did you buy real estate at the time?
no. I wish I had. No, unfortunately, I wanted to, but I didn't. Didn't really make enough money for that. Even then, the real estate was expensive.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
at
I
least for
guess
a person on an entry level salary who took whatever they gave me. you know,
right.
I don't
And
even
so
know
are
if my
you
salary was good or
so
not.
if we can again, I'm not trying to put an age number on you, but I am trying to get a sense of the
Yeah, sure.
period of the world. So is this what, mid 80s?
We're in the. I moved up there. Let's see. I think it was 1983.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are in mid 80s, and I was.
Great time for music.
Yes, it was a great time for music. But what we skipped here is I moved from LA area to San Francisco area. This is Mountain View is a suburb of San Francisco. So Culturally, it was a very different place, really, than LA. So I had a lot of adjustment that I was going through. But I was working so hard that in a way it didn't matter.
Okay, so how long were you with National
I was
Nuclear?
I was there 6 years, and my first assignment there, or second assignment, was to build software for a fuel rod assay machine. That's what they were called. By the way, these were like 5-ton machines, 5 tons of lead. Then you'd take the nuclear fuel rod, would go through it, and sensors were creating data as it became irradiated, and taking that data is what the software did. So that's what I was doing, is getting real-time data,
Hmm.
analyzing it in real time, and determining, the quality of the construction
So
of the
at the
rod itself.
when you were doing that work, how much did you have to know very much about nuclear engineering at the time, or was it really just computer science driven kind of problems, and the chemistry physics part of it, you didn't have to, you yourself didn't have to know too much about the detail?
That's right. That's right. So the algorithms, the calculations that were needed to get the numbers that they wanted were given to me. However, they were given to me in formulas, and I had to translate it into software that worked on the computer.
Okay.
And some of that was Fortran. This is some really old stuff,
Yeah.
but this was real time programming, and many of the other languages didn't do real time, and also assembly language. So I was using assembly language and Fortran to do this. And initially, it was all just a program that would run once, but it became multitasking. So there were several tasks running at the same time.
Huh.
Um, but my second assignment was to develop this.
Were the chips designed at the time to be able to multitask?
This was a part of the PDP-11, and it did have a multitasking operating system. Yep.
Okay.
But what a software engineer would do that maybe an electronics engineer might not have done in that situation was take advantage of the multitasking capability and having a
Okay.
bunch of things happening at the same time, and then communicating between them. So there was a lot of parallel
Yeah,
processing
I
going
mean
on.
that's kind of I guess I don't I don't want to misstate. I'm not a computer scientist. I didn't study computer science, but in terms of the differences between multitasking and multi-threading, I don't know if there's a, a huge difference, but it's a definitely a software challenge.
Right, to use it effectively in this was a challenge. And things were done more manually, like multi-threading could be automated later on, but this is multitasking where you're specifically launching different tasks to do things and having them share results and then move on to the next thing. So
And this was
a lot of,
and where did the OS come from? I guess and I
that
guess I,
was
go ahead.
that was Digital Equipment Corporation.
Oh,
It
Deck.
was,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Got bought by
Um,
Wang, I think, right in late
oh,
'80s.
I
Anyway, I
didn't,
can't remember where or maybe it was HP that ended up with Deck.
I don't,
I can't recall
I don't
now.
remember that either. I don't know their eventual fate, but they were really the top, what were called mini computers at the time, and clearly suited for industrial use, which is what we were doing it for. But what I'm wanting to tell you is that I got an assignment to build a machine from Japan, and we didn't finish it on time. Now ask any like 20, 24-year old or whatever software engineer how long something's going to take, and at least back then the answer would be incorrect. So I gave them, a really unrealistic amount of time, and when it wasn't done, they shipped me to Japan to finish the work.
As a was that as a penalty or a reward? Or
Neither one. It was a business decision because the customers there really needed to receive and get this stuff working.
and
So
this was for I guess for a nuclear plant in Japan.
it's for nuclear uh, fuel development plant. Yeah,
Okay, hopefully not
Japan nuclear fuel,
Fukushima.
and it was Japan nuclear fuel.
Okay,
So Fukushima was a nuclear power plant, and Japan Nuclear Fuel made the fuels for that and other plants.
right.
Yeah,
So you're 24, and so during your 6 year period, you went to Japan, or that was at the end of your 6 year period.
it was towards the maybe it was the second or third year, and to kind of insert a little bit of life there. So I
And you didn't know the language going there,
no,
correct? Okay.
not a word of Japanese except
And did you
arigato.
were you somewhat multilingual at this point outside of computer languages?
No, not in Japanese.
Okay, I mean, but well, another way of asking is, was learning language easy for you?
Oh,
Um, okay,
um, not particularly. I mean, I think I'm really good at hearing languages, but not as good at learning to produce the language. And in that situation, where I was under a little bit of pressure to finish this software and go home. It took 3.5 months. Um, I was aided by the Japanese engineers that were there. So they were in the host company was Seiko, the watch company, Daini Seikosha. And so I had a team of, depending on how many were there at the time, two or three guys that I taught them the design of the overall software, architecture that I was working with, and they helped write some of the algorithms to finish the work. So,
okay.
so
And
that
did it
was
actually? And well, so quick question on was the programming in regular English, Fortran, or
yes,
whichever it was, or was it had to be translated to Japanese
no,
language?
it was English,
Okay,
including the outputs, the displays and the reports at the end, all were in English, and so the Japanese users had to be fluent in English, or at least reading fluent in English to understand it.
and were the Japanese engineers comfortable working with that?
Well, they did all right. They did all right.
Okay,
They got better at it with time. So anyway, so I worked with them, and there were actually several trips to Japan with multiple add-ons to that project and other machines that they needed. And over time, I got to know one of them, and that person later moved to the United States and became my first husband.
okay. So that and that's where Kusumoto comes from.
Yes, a lot of
Okay.
people ask me that, so that's the
Actually,
answer to
what's your
that.
maiden name, if I can ask?
It was Roberts.
Roberts. Okay,
Hmm.
Laura Roberts. It's almost
Yeah.
like an L.A. actress name.
Right, exactly. So, so that was that, and I think that that changed my lifestyle a bit. Obviously, became married and really very focused on work, and that was a really comfortable situation there in Silicon Valley. Um, but I became because I wasn't really interested in nuclear engineering, I became really interested in the hot thing at the time, which was AI.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
the hot thing at the time, what 1990, 91?
Yeah, and you know what? I gave you the wrong year before. I'm sorry. So, National Nuclear, started, so I actually had started there earlier. And around 1983, I started working for two companies at the same time, National Nuclear, and then I got an internship at a company called TechKnowledge. And
Technology.
TechKnowledge, TekNowledge.
Okay. Technology.
TechKnowledge was, and I got this arrangement with National
Wait,
Nuclear.
so you're working a full time job as a professional and taking an internship.
Correct.
Okay. And what was the
Hmm.
internship?
It was in this company called TechKnowledge that was developing expert systems using what we called AI at the time.
Right.
And that kind of AI still is AI, but it's one of many different techniques that is used in AI today. So at TechKnowledge, it was the first venture-backed software firm in Silicon Valley, and it
The,
had been started by a
the,
number of
no, I'm
yeah
just making sure I'm listening, hearing that right. It's the first venture backed software company in the
in
valley.
Silicon Valley. That's right.
That's historic.
It was
I
before
would hope
that
it
the
has its
venture.
own Wikipedia page.
That's a good question. That's we should look that up. um, So I wanted to get into that. Luther's father actually helped me get the internship there, and so I was working there 1 day a week and still doing my job at National Nuclear. And by the way, I had gotten my master's degree in computer science at Santa Clara University by now.
Oh, okay.
So that was my master's degree, and I became a software engineer for TechKnowledge, whereas a number of the people there were this newfangled thing called knowledge engineers. And what the software engineers did is we developed tools for the knowledge engineers to use. They were using higher level languages, and they would go out and try to, I'm going to use the wrong verb here, but they would try to extract knowledge from subject matter experts and represent it in the expert system. Whereas software engineers, we were using symbolic processing and object oriented programming and logic programming,
Well,
Prolog.
I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, and I mean we don't need to go off on tangent too much, but what I have learned over my years of knowledge management trying to be instilled within a company or a department is it is much less about the tool and much more about the culture on whether it's successful or not.
Well, that is really, really true. And that is something that um, it takes, I think, more a different position in a company and an industry to understand. When you're, as I was, a young software engineer, you're very focused on solving the problem that you've been given by the company. Um, Getting something accepted is something that I'm more into and versed in now with all the experience that I have in later years, actually applying these systems. But here I was developing it, and other folks were working on the application problem.
So how large was technology at the time when you started interning? I mean, was this more than 100 people or less than that?
No, I, I, I don't know exactly, but I believe it was around the size of 40 people, something
Okay.
like that.
I mean,
And the
that's got to
biggest,
be an amazing. I know very few people. I can't even think of one off the top of my head right now. That well, maybe Walter and some others, but uh, that were in Silicon Valley during the '80s and during this huge boom.
yeah,
Well before '94 and Mosaic.
absolutely. And I wish I had photographic memory from that time
I mean, how many
because,
times did you probably pass Steve Jobs at the mall
yeah, who
and,
knows?
and, and didn't know it?
And didn't know it. Yeah, and Cupertino wasn't far away, and that was just in the range of where we would go shopping and grocery stores and all that kind of stuff. So it's very likely that I passed a lot of computer science famous people, and some of them were in technology itself. These were some of the most uh, accomplished, AI researchers.
I mean, this is early days
And
of like Sun Microsystems and Oracle.
yep, yep,
Um, and well, to think about, I mean, I'm almost curious now to like who were the people that actually backed technology early on? Who were those early investors, and and what did they do the following years?
yeah. I don't know about the following years, but there were a number of investors, and some of them invested in more than one AI company. They were so bullish on it, but I guess they wanted more than one egg in the basket. So there was another company similar to ours called IntelliGenetics, which had started out with genetics, and they also were developing AI techniques, and they were a big competitor of ours in the marketplace. And also another thing that started then that has been repeated over and over again since that era is there was a big hype wave, big hype boom around AI. I remember clipping articles or getting copies of articles from like the Wall Street Journal about ha ha ha, will there be artificially intelligent toothpaste in our future? They were there was a lot of imagination in the press about what impact this would have on society and every industry you can imagine.
I mean, the I'm just to date where I am in this period. I mean, I would guess I was in sixth grade in '83, but I started with a Commodore VIC-20 when I was 9, and I was on CompuServe in those
Awesome.
early days. Um, and uh, I think what I remember from that period, at least from what was popular, and as far as AI was concerned, what seemed to be where the cutting edge was from a consumer standpoint was dragon dictation.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I don't know.
Mostly.
I wasn't up the speed on what was happening at an industrial level. So tell me a little bit about TechKnowledge. How many years were there? The products that you built and where they maybe got. Did you feel like did you guys build something that got utilized in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. But you have to understand, we had two things. We were building tools and selling the tools for people to develop applications with. And then we also had a consulting branch that was developing actual applications. And I would say that would be the more kind of glamorous part, where they were, actually developing things for
So
the
you
nuclear
were
industry.
you were building a dev platform for other developers.
Exactly, exactly.
And
So that's what.
did it catch? I mean, was it something that what was the name of the platform?
There were two of them. One of them
Or-
was called M1, and the other one was called S1. And I'm sure you've never heard of these. But again, they were built using the AI languages of the day: Lisp, Prolog,
Yeah.
object oriented programming. I was using C also. And with that, we built these higher level languages that the knowledge engineers could use to quickly represent knowledge using rules, confidence factors, some of the other things that made it easy to represent knowledge as opposed to algorithms.
Okay.
So that you would declare what the knowledge is, and then the tool had an engine that it would run over the declaration of the knowledge with some procedures, and it would run through that and come up with advice or plans or strategies, depending on what we're trying to emulate from the subject matter expert. And that
So
expert might be an expert in car repair. They might be an expert in, you know,
okay.
yeah,
So how many years were you at TechKnowledge?
6 years.
6 years. And from your perspective, I mean, were they a successful company? Did they get to profitability from you know beyond the funding that they received?
Yeah, they ended up similar to other early stage companies that are successful. So they were successful in their time, generating a lot of hype. A lot of major companies bought the tools and bought education from the company, and also bought consulting from the company in many industries. But there was a downturn, and this was my first hype cycle that I've ever experienced personally. There was a great hype cycle, and then there was the trough of disillusionment, which happened right around 1989. This was the first AI winter. And as we
Well,
entered the
so let
winter,
me ask: was this a national economic downturn, or was this a technology downturn
it was an
in
AI
the region?
downturn for sure. I don't recall if
I
that
mean,
was
we're
a
now talking about
financial.
the Reagan years. Well, I
Yeah, we
guess
are.
no. I guess what George H. Bush would have been.
Yeah, we
No,
were transitioning.
80. Wait, when did the president? Was Clinton's
89.
first? Yeah, that would have
That
been
was
H. Bush.
1990.
George H. Bush
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
Were
yes.
we in a recession then? I think we were. Well, we went into a war, so we must have been in a recession because we went to war to get out of the recession, right?
Yeah,
Usually how it goes, but
yeah. I have clearer memories of the later recessions, but not at that time. Anyway, there was kind of a bust for AI. That whole industry quote unquote segment lost credibility, and technology was acquired by another company, and it continued uh, to perform for another 15 years. I think technology was around for a total of over 20 years,
well,
and still had.
as that name.
They were acquired by another company, and then they came back with that name later on. So yes, with
Hmm.
that name, and I think they finally went out of business in something like 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, they were probably they went out of business. What, about 4 or 5 years before probably ChatGPT was getting going?
Yeah, and so that's an interesting thing. And the techniques that we were using at the time, they are still useful today. They're still used in creating expert systems today. But the big difference is we had no way of automating the learning part. And so with the large language models and other techniques that we have, the deep learning, we now have the learning that can, teach a system. And there's a variety of kinds of systems that it can teach these days. So it's just one in the bag of techniques that we have today.
Okay, so if I'm right on our current timeline, we're 1990.
Yeah.
George H. Bush is in the White House. We're either about to go into Kuwait, and you're either out of it, or so. What are you doing at this point?
Yeah, I went to become an independent consultant, and I did a lot of different things, which is way too much to drag out in detail. But I think the most interesting and significant thing was another startup company called Magic Edge, and
Magic Egg,
Magic Edge.
Edge. Okay, that sounds sort of familiar.
Yeah, well, there've been various companies starting with the word magic over the
Right.
years. Like Magic Leap later on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I'm sure
Magic Edge,
we could have a drinking game around that. I'm sure.
yes, we could. Um, Magic Edge was started by a mechanical engineer, and I was recruited as someone. By then, I was interested in computer graphics. So I was
Okay.
recruited to his team as someone who knew something about computer graphics, and I really was mostly an advisor that helped to write the business plan and come up with the technology strategy and help to steer him away from trying to use PCs for what he was trying to do and into using silicon graphics equipment.
Okay.
Um, and the what it was a location based entertainment center that would have pods in which a individual could go in a pod, and you'd be able to, it was basically a tiny little flight simulator, so you'd be
Okay.
able to fly this pod. He had designed it so you could turn all the way upside down, 360 degrees of motion, and you could fly in it. And to make a very long story short, I helped him in the first year along with other people on the team. I invested in the company, I earned stock from the company, but the virtual pay got to me, and I later had to get a job. So I left it before all the products were built. But in the end, the location based center was opened. It was called Magic Edge. It was on Space Park Way in Mountain View, California. And it had a restaurant and several of these networked pods where you could fly in formation. You could not go 360 degrees because that
Wait.
made people
When you say
sick.
information, do you mean multiple people could be in different pods flying together?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
It
and
was
so this is
fantastic.
this. Wait. So what year did it get to market?
It went to market. I'm gonna quote this wrong because I wasn't there. I think it was roughly around 1995
Okay.
or four
Oh,
four or five.
that was the VR heyday for that period.
It was that's right. And there were
Uh,
other location based centers that were opening up doing a
I have a
variety of
slide.
things.
I have a slide where PC gamer from somewhere sometime some month in
Yes.
1995 is about VR.
Yep. There was
Um,
one called Fighter Town. There were a number of different things that emerged. It was like one of these emergent themes in technology at the
these things
time.
never made it to the East Coast, I don't think, because I don't. I mean, I was big
It's
into
so sad.
arcades growing up, but maybe I can barely remember anything VR related. In in the commercial arcade in the Northeast or in the Philly area.
That's a shame because they were fun. And
So
this
what?
place
How
in
much did a Magic Edge ride cost at the time? Can you remember?
I can't, but you would buy the experience. Like you'd go in and you'd get a ticket for the whole. It was kind of a theme park ride, And
Right.
it was
Well, no,
definitely
I'm just
designed.
curious, was it a reasonable price for the period, or was it,
It
really
was.
expensive? And so
No,
how
it was, yeah,
go ahead.
it was reasonably affordable. I don't know, it was, $40 or something like that for the experience, which would last. You'd get your training, you'd go and do your flying, there'd be a debrief. There was also a restaurant there. And so this was used a lot for team building for the local companies, and also for date people going on dates and all that. A lot of people around at that time do remember Magic Edge. It was really cool and
And
fun.
the pod turned 360, and
Originally it did, but they had in their user
I would
testing.
imagine it made a lot of people sick.
Exactly. So they had to cut down the angles at which you could turn,
So
rotate.
how long did they last in the market? Do you
They
remember?
lasted just a few years, and then it
Okay.
was acquired. And I think they actually shut it down. I don't think it was operated after the acquisition.
Okay.
Um,
I gotta look this
and it
up now
was
online because I'm curious to see what the graphics look like. And
it's
I go,
it's interesting. All these things that we're talking about. I remember someone saying it was right around 1999 that if something wasn't on the internet, it didn't exist. And that's
if
true. It's hard to find some of these things because the internet wasn't around yet.
that's true, but I found, I mean, there's so many. I mean, you just look at Wikipedia. I mean, there's so many enthusiasts that publish history. I mean, I mean, the internet is our human history machine at this point, for good or for bad. And I'm sure it doesn't have all. I mean, we're still probably migrating all the published books and printed books through time to it, but
Yeah,
uh,
that's
it's
true.
slowly getting there. So okay, well, so you helped for a year there with the business plan and project, and you consulted on and off for how long?
For 6 years.
For another
Oh,
6 years.
to various companies. So that ended in 1995 when I took a job at Intuit.
Intuit, okay.
Yeah.
Accounting.
So, and Bob, we have a long way to go. So if you want me to speed up, I can do that.
No, we're
But
not on any timeline, and we can
okay.
always do a part two if necessary.
Okay.
I'm learning a lot, and there's a huge amount of this history that I wasn't aware of. Um,
So
so yeah, so tell me about Intuit, because so that was this early days of Intuit.
it wasn't the earliest days. Intuit was founded earlier. It was a pretty well established company at the time. A random statistic I remember is that they had a customer service or tech support. What did they call it? Customer service department of 5,000 people by then. They had
Oh my
3
God,
million people.
that's huge.
They had 3 million people using Quicken Deluxe, not to mention the other
Oh yeah, that's
Quickens.
right. They made Quicken. So was
That's
Intuit
right.
public at that point?
I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. So uh,
So what I so
why'd you
what I
take a job
did,
there? That seems extremely out of place
I
for
know.
someone with small companies before.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Magic Edge, and I had done several other things in that interim, but I was trying to get into kind of 3D computer graphics. Uh, and by the way, along the way during that consulting period, I also met I had gotten a divorce from Mr. Kusumoto, and I met my second and permanent husband, Christian Groyle,
I
at
find
a
it funny how you
conference.
referenced your first divorce as Mr. Kusumoto.
That's right. That's right. Um, and
I'm sorry.
That's all right. But we met at a conference called the Entertainment Authoring Conference in Los Angeles, which was sponsored by Silicon Graphics Silicon Studio. So I was going to conferences like that. I was, interviewing people that were doing 3D graphics, and Christian Goyle was one of them. So I met him prior to starting it Intuit, and we're still together. So that's a
Okay,
historical note.
the
Great
gentleman
importance to me.
I've sort of shared dinners with a couple times now.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
Um,
That very
so
person.
wait, so you met him at a conference, or you met him at Intuit?
Met him at a conference.
Okay,
At,
and what did you? Why did you join Intuit, or what did you join to do?
Yeah, well, the consulting business wasn't working out so well for me in that later period, so I ended up looking for a full time job, and Intuit was a company that was willing to take me on with my very diverse background, and I wanted a multimedia job. Most importantly, I wanted to
Well, I mean,
integrate
at
my.
this point, you've got a lot of international experience. You've got experience in a variety of different industries. I would imagine that you were pretty attractive candidate at that point.
Yeah, but I was my aim was to get into multimedia. So that was the real challenge is kind of changing. And people often ask me, Bob, how did you get from here to there? And I think sometimes you want
So,
something and you look for ways to transition.
so did you ever look at that period at like get the video games industry?
I did. Um, I did, and I didn't. Let's see. I'm trying to remember when I tried to
Were
approach
you into
that.
video games at all, or was that not much of an interest?
I wasn't, and I think that throughout the time I love the graphics, I love the process of production, but I've always been more interested with, well, there's a couple of exceptions, but I guess I was always more interested in things that had more practical um, impact. Magic Edge was an exception, right? But Intuit, I was attracted to the fact that it was something that helped millions of people with their finances.
Okay, you wanted to work on nuclear energy, um, other things that have practical use. I can
Right.
respect that. Not
Yeah.
pie in the sky ideas like putting having flight simulators. Though
Well,
well,
yeah.
flight simulators for fun. Let's put it
So
that way.
yeah, so I really I can't. I guess I went back and forth. As you continue here, I went back and forth on this over time. But the video game industry, I just didn't find the right entry point. I think is really what it is. It was a matter of chance, and it just didn't happen.
Okay. So how long were you into it?
I was into it for a couple of years, and I did get my multimedia assignment, which is what I was looking for, producing a CD-ROM, which was Quicken Deluxe 5.0 for Windows, all of the multimedia
Okay, wait.
learning
I'm gonna
material on
have to
it.
look. I'm gonna have to look for this on eBay. So Quicken Deluxe
I
five
have a
point
copy if you want one.
5.0. Yeah, and the problem is I probably don't have a CD-ROM drive anywhere.
Nobody does, and this version of Windows is long gone. But at the time, the
Yeah,
audience,
so what would that have been, Windows 3.0 maybe, or
it
3.1?
was 5.0.
No, no, Windows. What version of
Oh,
Windows?
the Windows version. Oh, God. I don't know.
It had to be before XP.
Yeah. You talked about having a Commodore computer when you were 9. I also had purchased my own PC when I was just getting out of college, and I think just as a career note, that helped me because I had something to be working on at home on my own stuff aside from
Actually,
what
I'm
I was
curious,
assigned to do at work.
did you ever kind of participate in the whole BBS's kind of, culture?
A little bit, yep,
Ok
I did. Yeah, and I was on CompuServe also. I tried that. I tried a lot of different things.
yeah, I think, yeah, CompuServe and I was on BBS's a lot, and I actually never really liked AOL all that much, or Prodigy.
I
I think
tried
once
those
I
too.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were just, well, I don't know. I guess for me, well, and again, a lot of people at the time thought that Prodigy was the internet,
Yes, they
and
did.
in a lot of ways, it felt like the internet with training wheels. But yeah, I mean, the CompuServe and early IRC chat, on that kind of stuff was really where the fun was. But and BBSs, and calling into those, whether they were local or national, was a large part of my time. And this is when I had like an Apple IIe,
Yeah,
or a first PC. Uh, uh, early. I can't even remember. Well, early PC. So
yeah, they were
Windows
fun.
3 kind of era. So
But I think it was important for us at that time to have something outside of work. And I know that I think that divided. There was kind of division in society. Those people that had those things at home were advancing along the technology spectrum.
So what happened to the painting and the artwork? Did you not pursue that in the evening hours or the weekends?
No, I never was able to get in that headspace while doing this other kind of work. And you've heard a theme. I worked hard. I was really kind of a workaholic.
Right.
So I
Well, and
that put
this was
so
pretty heady work. I'm sure you were probably
yeah.
brain drained by the end of every day.
Yeah. So I never really was able to integrate. I mean, I have some visual hobbies that I had over time. I learned various art techniques. So I would take classes, I would do things, but it never became a consistent thing over a period of time. I do dream of getting back to it someday.
Someday still
Someday.
not.
I'm still not
I
doing
mean, I'm
anything
trying to
regular.
find. I think one of my there is a problem with being a workaholic, and especially when you work for yourself,
Yeah.
when there really is no real 9 to 5. You're kind of always working. I mean, not in a bad way. I mean, when you work for yourself and if you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work most of the time. But it is hard to find divergent hobbies, or things to you know get you out of that space. I struggle with that, a lot these days, and I find it extremely hard to relax. It's hard to
Hmm.
turn off and not think about work or worry about work or think about and completely not think about other things. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the short version. That's the really easy part of just not even getting off your phone for a while.
absolutely. I think that's a big theme for today's world. I think even then, I mean, then I think there were ways to unplug, but what the information environment we're in today is much more consuming on outside of work. So you take the fire hose of information you have in connection with what you want to do or have to do, and you combine that with all the options outside of that. It is pretty overwhelming for our primitive brains.
So the so what was the graphics challenge with Quicken Deluxe
Oh
5.0?
yes,
And
yes.
was it authoring the software, or was there like tutorial stuff you were creating that included video?
Yeah, we had video, and that was challenging at the time. We made a little animation, some animations to try to animate some diagrams, and that was kind of experimental, not experimental overall in the industry, but experimental for a small team to be doing that on our own. I commissioned some 3D art because I just had to do something in 3D, so we had some 3D menus, like some coins that you would click on and they'd open up and do things. And I was given a budget to try new things because they wanted it to be more engaging than the standard kind of online flat looking offerings that most people were producing at the time. So I think that was reasonably successful. But after that project was completed and released, and it was a great experience for me learning how to do a commercial offering like that for an audience of 3 million people. And by the way, we did, that was, I'm going to skip that part. The next thing that I
Wait,
worked on
wait, wait,
was,
wait, wait, wait. Back up for a second. What were you going to say?
oh, we worked on, we worked on some stuff that didn't make it in, for example, wanted to put in some audio, like an audio, how when you would look at a television network and it when it introduces it has a tone to it.
Yeah.
We wanted to put some tones in there. So there were some things that experimental things that they did accept. There were experimental things that they didn't accept.
So putting the product development stuff aside, how did you feel? I mean, did you enjoy the large corporate structure, or was that something that you really didn't enjoy? Um, Compared to, I mean, there's pros and cons to working in large structures and versus smaller teams.
Yeah.
Neither is necessarily perfect for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons.
I it is such a mixed bag. I mean, there's certain things about it that are just fascinating. Like one of the things we were
I mean,
allowed to do
at
was
least medical, and you have a real HR department with a corporation
Yes,
that size.
you do. You do. And things were moving very fast. And one thing about a big company like that is you've got side projects going on. And I joined the, what did we call it? The Internet Club inside Intuit. So
Okay.
the internet was beginning to graduate, getting into the net. It was coming off of the kind of hobbyist phase and the DARPA phase and
Had
becoming
had
a
had
public.
Intuit made the leap yet to online software?
Here's the thing: I was on that first team, so
Okay.
because I was in the Internet Club, I was one of the people
because you
chosen
because you had the interest.
because I had the interest and not necessarily any qualifications. I was selected to be the first producer of the Quicken Financial Network website.
That's pretty big. And trying to build something for a brand name company and product at that point for probably a fairly large expected online audience, I would assume was pretty challenging.
It was, and I had to learn a lot. And by the way, this is the kind of thing that I really like, but it was super, super stressful, because things I didn't know. I didn't know much about managing branding and things like that. And of course, I wasn't alone. I had a whole team. I helped to recruit the team. Uh,
Oh,
to
so
make a long,
it wasn't just the software backend you were doing. You were responsible
we
for making it a product,
we were making it a website,
a website, but a
a
well,
website.
and a product in its own. And now, was this for, but to use Quicken Online, not just brochureware website?
Right. But yes, that was going on and that was integrated with the website. I was in charge of the website, which
Okay.
sounds like nothing, but there were no tools. There
No,
was the
no,
Netscape
I
browser.
remember these days well. I mean,
There were no tools. There
there was
were
no dynamic, HTML really.
style. That's right. There was no JavaScript.
I don't think
Uh,
there. I mean, there was no JavaScript at this point.
there was no JavaScript.
So this
We
is
weren't
like this is like early days of Yahoo,
totally early days.
and probably
So
Google wasn't even out yet.
there was no Google. That's
Yeah.
right. I think the search engines had just started. Google wasn't around yet. I think Google was founded in '98, if I
So I
recall
don't know
correctly.
if I ever shared this story with you, and I don't know. Yeah, and this was 98, 99. So I was working at the time for well, I mean, this is kind of when the internet was really taking off pretty fast, but CMGI.
Yes.
Um, and CMGI was based out of Andover, Massachusetts, and they were trying to build, and it was a public company, and they were building, and I ended up with a job there because I was contracting for a very small, like less than 10 people, startup in Northern Virginia that made web-based email systems that could scale for, like, millions of users. So they were selling to ISPs and telephone companies and so forth. And I was doing some kind of customer engineering, sales engineering, consulting for them, and some overseas work. But they got acquired, by CMGI, and CMGI bought, was buying up companies, small companies left and right. Pets.com was probably one of the most famous, with the
Wow.
pets puppet, hand puppet. And so I became, their headquarters was Andover, Mass. They were building an office in Northern Virginia, um, uh, and kind of consolidating these smaller companies they bought. And I was hired to, I guess I was doing like early internet research on mobile, and I was just bored out of my skull. They weren't really using me very well. They weren't very well organized as a company. And I started a hobby site out of my cubicle, and this was late 98, early 99, called Cool WAP Site of the Day. I was reviewing first generation websites on cell phones. So this is WAP
Wow.
1.0.
Okay.
Um, and Before I knew it, about 6 months in, I was then getting like 10,000 hits a day to the website. And again, this was like early, HTML, coding every single page.
Right.
um,
Wow.
and, and, uh, I, and I actually managed to get our content on Sprint's phone deck, which was this was early at the time, and FidoNet in Canada, and believe it or, and then I actually, and I have a few copies. I'll have to get you a copy left, but and then I self published a printed book. It was kind of like a small form factor book of about like 100 of these reviews. And somehow, and I had this. This is my end to Michael Saylor. Hopefully, is somehow I got strategy.com provided the back cover and covered most of the printing cost.
Wow.
So, and that was kind of that was like my first, I guess, toe into trying to build my own content, you know,
Mhm.
company and stuff. So I,
And you've
but
never
this
stopped.
was early days of banner advertising, and
Yeah.
I couldn't really monitor. I don't, you really needed like even at that period you needed tens of thousands, 100,000 hits a day to just make even a few dollars on banner advertising.
That hasn't changed on YouTube. It's not
No, but
banner advertising, but
Google was out at this point, and this was like around the
yeah.
days when DoubleClick was out,
Right. Okay.
and that whole just model was developing. But again, I mean, companies like sites like Yahoo and the other now I'm trying to think of some of the larger search engines back then. I mean, they were
Alta
making money, and they
Vista.
were hundreds of thousands of hits a day and stuff. So it was growing. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry,
It was growing fast.
unnecessary segue tangent.
That's okay.
Um,
No, that's part of that era. Well, on the Quicken Financial Network, we published 6,000
oh,
pages by
that's right. We were
hand.
talking that we got off on JavaScript. That's well, this was
Right, right,
actually
right.
JavaScript was just coming out because I remember on the mobile side at least there was the early Java on mobile, and people were building applications and sites using the Java engine, as best as though Java had a lot of headaches and problems.
Yeah, well, we
This
weren't
is
using it there. I don't remember why. But we built these pages in a very short period of time. Um, and it was such a short period of time that we burned out just about everybody who was working on it. But there were 24 departments of the company, including all the TurboTax that all of them needed their web presence. So that was what was created. So anyway, that was my multimedia experience at Intuit, and that was the beginning of
is
the
that the
Quicken
largest
Financial
company you
Network.
ever worked at?
Oh
Well,
no,
outside the VA.
no, not at all.
No, okay. So
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 from
where'd you go
there,
after Intuit?
skipping a couple steps, I moved to Denmark
You moved to
to
Denmark.
work. Yes,
Why? I,
to
I mean,
work for
Denmark is beautiful, very expensive.
Lego.
Oh, you're kidding! I had no
I am
idea.
not kidding. I'm not kidding.
You've never why that you need to redo your bio.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
worked at Intuit, worked at Lego, worked at National Nuclear Corporation. I mean, these are things
Yes.
that get you higher up on the speaking ladder.
Well, thank you, Bob. I actually, there are so many different experiences in here that I do sincerely struggle to decide what to share with people. And it's not out of wishing to hide anything. It's just, there's just too much detail in
Well, yeah,
general.
yeah. But
I've organized it into
that's the reason we're
chapters.
having this conversation is to get that stuff out. You don't
Yeah.
yes, I mean when you're doing an elevator pitch or you're trying to you're doing your consulting hat on and trying to convince people why they should hire you, you only have a certain amount of time.
Right. And do you tell them, well, I was a former punk rocker that worked for Lego, or do you tell them that I was a
Well,
consultant that worked for
that's
Deloitte and Meta?
you
What do
gotta
you
read
tell
your
them?
audience. You gotta read your audience at that
Exactly.
point.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
So what?
So
So you got a I mean that's pretty huge. Get an opportunity to move to Denmark and join Lego. Did they pay for your move?
they did. And this had to do, it was partly due to my then boyfriend, now husband, Christian Goyle, that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
They wanted him.
Oh,
And he had turned down the opportunity. And then a year later, they came back and they said, well,
all right. Well,
if you
we'll
won't go
sweeten the
because your
offer.
girlfriend, yeah, if you won't go because your girlfriend, then what does your girlfriend do? And so they looked at my resume and said, oh my God. So they hired both of us.
And why did they want him initially?
He's a 3D real time modeler. So
Okay.
yeah, he has an actual
Oh,
formal education in art.
so that's how you got your graphics.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
You couldn't find it at work, so you married it.
I married into the industry. That's a
Okay.
great way to put it. Yeah. So they were doing the development of 3D Lego. Again, these were early days. They didn't have a library of Lego in 3D and CAD, so they had hired a lot of Danish modelers there in Billund, Denmark, to model every single Lego at multiple levels of resolution. And it took a large number of people to do that because it was all being done by hand, of course, back then. They had the largest computer graphics installation in Scandinavia, and it was all SGI machines. All of this was set up before we got there, but they were expanding kind of the research and development aspect of this. And for me, what they wanted from me was stuff that I had never done before, which was really to be effectively the director of operations for this group, which had about 85 people at the time.
So
They wanted
like IT operations.
IT, administration, facilities,
Okay.
finance, legal, all that sort of COO stuff, but it's inside a unit in a company. So it was a director
But
level
and
position
for a different country.
for a different country. That's right. For a unit that's focused on 3D graphics.
Okay. That's interesting.
And so, in addition to doing the Lego in 3D, they were also creating animations of Lego. Like the earliest Lego movie was prototyped by the guy who actually founded this whole or inspired this whole unit called Darwin. It was called SPU, Special Project Unit Darwin. And they were creating computer animations, really, really cute Lego animations
And
within
what
the.
year was this?
We're in 1997 and
And do you
through
remember the
1999.
name of this first Lego movie?
It was they. I think he called it the Lego Movie, but it had nothing to do with what you saw commercially later on. It was, but it was.
Right,
And
but
by the way, there's
I don't think this is the same Lego movies that had, billion-dollar blockbuster
no,
success.
no, no, no. But it was called the same thing, and it inspired this special product unit, Darwin, to explore digital Lego, which was in 3D. So it was the precursor, if you will, of Lego being in that spatial universe, which they've been in ever since.
Right, right. Well, where most of their expansion has been, it seems.
That's right. That's right. Well,
So,
anyway, we
and
had
where were you in? Uh, were you? I forget the capital of Denmark.
no, we were
Copenhagen.
not Copenhagen. We were not. We were most specifically not. We were in the opposite of that. We were in a lovely rural town known as Billund. I can't pronounce it correctly in
And
Danish, but
was it more inland or near the coast?
it's inland. It's very inland. It's as inland as you can get, and it's
It's
fairly.
like being in Bakersfield.
Yeah. Denmark is a peninsula at that point, and you're kind of centrally located between the two water bodies of water. And it also is fairly close to the German border. It's about maybe an hour drive from the German border. So it's kind of on the southern part of Denmark. And they have none of us with if you don't study Danish, you wouldn't know this, but they have a very strong southern Danish accent there.
Okay. Well, that's
Which is
awesome.
very
That
difficult for people who speak English to learn.
So, how long were you in Denmark?
I was there for about 2 years.
Only 2 years. Okay.
Only
Why
two
only two
years.
years?
It was a temporary assignment from the beginning.
Oh, okay.
They were hiring foreigners, including Americans, for a limited time. But also, what happened while we were there was they decided to disband the SPU Darwin because the overall Lego sales started to decline during that time. having nothing to do with us, but this was a major lesson learned that I've learned over and over again. When budgets in the overall company decline, the innovation groups or research groups often are expected to shrink to help pay for the losses.
Right.
So they shut our group down. They actually offered to have Chris and I both go to London and take jobs there. But
Oh,
we decided instead of doing that, that we would come home in 1999,
okay. Back to L.A.
back to San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco. Okay. Did
Yeah,
you
by
have a
that
home?
time,
Did you own a home in San Fran at this point, or
let's see,
were just renting?
when we left Mountain View, I owned a condo and then sold it, bought a house in Denmark, and sold that, and then came back and rented for a while in San Francisco, and then bought a condo in San Francisco.
Okay.
So I actually lived in the city,
Yeah,
which was
this was
great.
actually around that period, 99, 2000. I was actually spending quite a bit of time in the Silicon Valley area and Sunnyvale, um, and we were working with I can't remember. Oh yeah, this was with CMGI. They were working with SendMail,
Oh
um,
wow.
which was I think a big email service provider at the time. I can't remember what I was working on. I think there was some kind of conversion between SendMail and the email service provider software that they had bought that they acquired through. Um, I also worked on actually actually after that. So this was around 2000 2001, and actually connects us with Scandinavia. I did some field testing for a early um, Wi-Fi mesh network from Nokia. Actually, it was a company called Rooftop Communications in Mountain View that actually got bought by Nokia shortly after. Unfortunately, I didn't get myself entrenched enough before that purchase. But and so yeah, so this company Rooftop Communications building hardware to create an early regional Wi-Fi network in a neighborhood, and would create a mesh network between the routers on the rooftops to one point of presence for internet, and Nokia bought it and then did nothing with it.
Oh man, I was going to say that's really cool, but that's a shame that they did nothing with it.
Yeah, well, yeah, Nokia. I mean, they were focused on cell phones, and Nokia also made base station hardware for cellular networks, which is where I spent a couple of years as well. Okay, so you moved back to San Fran after you decided not to take up Lego's offer in London, which could have been an interesting experience for a couple of years.
It could have been,
What
but
was what was the decision there? Why um, London too expensive? Just not that interesting.
oh, it was
You
very
miss the
interesting.
U.S.
It was a very difficult decision to make. It was a great opportunity, but we just saw the direction of the Lego company as a whole as
as going
you know,
down.
yeah, the decreased sales and all that stuff, and we were very concerned about if we because I had had everything I owned, and he had everything he owned in Denmark, and it was going to be a big move to London. And then if we needed to go back home, they were not going to guarantee the cost of moving home. So that was
Right.
part of it. And
Okay.
also we saw that general direction of going down, and we just decided it was a risk either way, but we decided it was less risk going back to San Francisco. And one more thing, there was this huge industrial commercial economical party going on in the United States. This huge internet boom thing was going on, and we were missing the whole thing. We were working for a privately owned company, and we had no stock or anything. So we wanted to go back and get in the party in San Francisco,
Got it.
metaphorically speaking.
You wanted to join Netscape before it got went nowhere.
That's right. That's right. And if you know from the year, you can tell we were kind of late. So I actually became a I was invited to become the acting CEO of a spinout of Lego.
Oh,
And every one of these stories is long, but it was to using the constructive idea of Lego to it was a digital offering that allows kids to build build some shapes on the computer, and and that's what it was. It was a toy, more like Tinker Toys, but on the computer, allowing you to build things. And we had the founder of that.
wait, was there both a hardware and a software component?
With the Lego stuff, there was hardware and software. With this I do system stuff, it was strictly software.
Okay, so it was okay.
So it
So
was an
it wasn't like programming small little pieces of hardware through the computer
no,
and building stuff.
no. Although
Okay.
we did have Lego, but with I do systems, it was strictly a software digital toy. Really charming. A lot of the Lego designers had gone into that little startup, and they built the most charming examples and animations, and it was just incredible. I was so excited about it. But the job was to turn it into a business, and selling digital toys was not going to be easy. And one of the things that I did was join the internet boom and turned it into a internet-based offering in which kids could build toys, but they could share them with each other. And it developed into build a robot and play like kind of like battle bots online.
Okay.
So we built that and a couple other things and started looking
Was
for.
there a commercial name for this product when it once it hit online?
It never really went online. We had built the back end, we built the prototypes, and we were looking for funding to bring it online.
Okay. But and funding beyond what Lego was going to provide
Correct. So
or could
it
provide.
wasn't Lego; it was the owner of Lego that provided the seed funding with which we had developed this product. Then we were shopping around to get our next round of funding, and that never happened because the year 2000 rolled around, and anything having to do with the internet, which had been the source of the entire boom, suddenly was radioactive. Nobody wanted anything to do
Yes.
with
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
anything the internet.
March 2000. I remember
You remember it well,
extremely
right?
well. I was
Yeah.
yes.
So
And I well, I think I saw the writing on the wall and I got out. Um, well, I got lucky actually. I guess now I think about it. But we'll save that story for another time. So
okay.
well, yeah. So things were crashing quickly. Um, yeah, anything internet related was radioactive. And
So that was
they
like this another big boom and bust that I
did
experienced
they
in my
shut it
career.
completely or what happened?
Yeah, we had to shut it completely, and I was the CEO by the time we shut it down. So
Oh,
we went through that cycle of, well, let's take less salary, let's take a tenth of our salary.
so how many people were you leading at the time?
So my team was very small. I had three in the United States and three in Denmark.
Oh, okay, so less than 10 for
Yeah,
this
tiny.
startup.
This was
Okay,
tiny.
but still, you're the leader. I mean that's a different, very different
Yeah,
role, very different stress level,
a
very different
CEO.
responsibility.
Yeah, a CEO is uniquely
Did you
alone.
like it?
I loved parts of it, and I really didn't like other parts of it. I mean, the loneliness is amazing. You have no peers, and I don't like to talk about the gender aspects of things very often, but at that time, about 3% of fundings were for female CEOs.
I don't know if we've actually gotten much higher than that today.
I don't think we
I
have.
haven't looked at the stats, but I'm not. I don't know if we've actually made. I mean, we've made some progress, but I don't think as much as we would have expected by now.
So I have to say, looking back on it, I think that the funders and the board were extremely forward looking to select me as that CEO and put a lot of faith in me. So that was really cool. And what we developed was really cool. And we did apply for some patents, which we later did sell and gave the royalties to Lego for that.
Oh wow! I mean, do you think how far away were you from bringing it to commercial reality?
I mean, this was basically a client server based piece of software. So it wasn't just internet. It was a serious piece of graphics software. And how far were we? Well,
Was it did it run through the browser, or was something separate you downloaded or
it
installed?
was something you downloaded. So it had a
Okay.
client because it was 3D graphics, and that really didn't run well in browsers at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's another way I got my 3D graphics. So that was the end of that.
So that was 2 years.
That was 2 years. Yeah. And ending in 2001. Was able to stretch it out until 2001. And I did some independent stuff for a while and then ended up next going to a company with a very bland name called There,
There.
THERE.
Okay.
And There Inc. was building a virtual world online for socializing. It was effectively an emergent thing at the time, building social virtual worlds. So in March 2003, I went to work for There, but I was hired not to work on the social virtual world, but to take that whole platform and develop a version for it for the US military.
Okay. I've never heard of this either from you.
I
Uh,
know.
so building there, I've never even heard of there. Um, Building a version for the U.S. military. So, well, all right. Give me the story behind there, and did it ever
Yeah.
see commercial? Uh, did it ever make it?
Yes. Yeah. So they're actually they had hired Robert Gehorsam, who had he had applied for a grant under there and he got a $3.5 million contract to do this conversion over to the military. This was right after, or not long after 9/11,
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
the Iraq War was going on, and they were looking at, and the situation was at the time was that our military was not as used to asymmetric warfare as they had been right after the Vietnam War. So they had kind of drifted away from that asymmetric warfare training. And there was an opportunity in virtual worlds that Robert saw that we could build simulated versions of wherever the war was happening, but use it to have people practice interpersonal relationships, whatever that means in a war setting. So that would be the teams of the soldiers, the squads, etc., learning to communicate with each other, but also how do they deal with the population that's there. They had the assignment at the time in Iraq to win hearts and minds at the same time that there were also enemies to be fought, and there were IEDs, and it was
Yeah.
just an incredibly complicated thing to train for. So the idea was that this could be a training tool to help them train for various techniques and procedures for all of the above.
I mean, it would seem. I mean, with this experience, you would seem like a perfect fit to be working at Anduril.
Yes, that's a good idea, Bob.
Yeah. I mean, get it. Well, it's still early.
Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing how fast that company's grown. But he's. I don't know if you saw him speak at AWE. I've seen him speak a couple times. I gotta say, I was really, really impressed with his demeanor and his composure this last time, and his maturity. And I thought he presented himself really, really well.
yeah, I'll have to catch the video. I didn't catch it at AWE, unfortunately, but I
Um,
will.
but he really explained, very, very well, why he was doing what he was doing, and trying to explain to the audience, the importance of. I mean, he's obviously very, very supportive of the military and the country, and he's driven by that. But I think it's all from the heart and from wanting to protect our soldiers as best as possible, not about making weapons.
Yeah. Well, this assignment for me, it was a dream job at the time. I was there almost 7 years,
Okay.
and I became the VP of studio. So I was not doing engineering. I was actually managing the development of the content. The company split off. Our part of the company split off to be a company called Forterra Systems, which people around virtual worlds at the time would recognize that name. Although
Well,
Forterra is also a tire company name, it wasn't the tire company.
so after, I mean, during 7 years, did it get deployed at any point?
Oh, yeah. So just like the earlier example I gave you, TechKnowledge, there were a lot of, first it was mainly DoD, but there were a number of different projects that we worked on, starting with the first one, which was asymmetric warfare environment. That spells AWE, asymmetric warfare environment. So whenever I hear AWE, I'm thinking of something else, right? So we developed that. And did a number of pilot tests with that with actual National Guard and active duty troops. But over time, we were doing business development and found that there could be some medical and medic kinds of training applications. We got into chem bio training for the military. And then we began to see, well, there are also potential applications in actual healthcare, starting with emergency disaster preparedness, but there were other kinds of training for nurses and for doctors. Wherever it involved interpersonal interaction, that would be the strength of this kind of platform. So we explored all of that. We got over $10 million in various different grants over time,
Wow.
built 60 applications. So
You
we
know,
do,
you do sound like you have the experience and are perfectly positioned to be a CEO of one of these other VR startups today.
yeah, I do. I could. Um,
Do you want to? I guess that's the question.
I, where I am right now, Bob, is I want to help advise them. I really want to be a partner for folks like that. I don't know if it's possible, but I want to make a living helping people do this without jumping in more
Without
than
all
full
the
time.
responsibility.
Right. It's not just the responsibility, but it's the time and the mind share. That's what I'm trying to develop is the skill of, and I am an advisor now to one startup company and I'm about to sign up on a second. And I
Oh,
want to
nice.
be able to, help them without, again, being a full time part of the team. And I think there's a craft to that I'm developing.
So 7 years at there, that's a long time.
Yes, it
Um,
was. And it was, developing 3D virtual worlds and how to use them for training and all of that. So I have a ton of experience applying virtual worlds, which of course is the same as VR. It's just that you're not using headsets, you're using a PC. It's 3D immersive, but not on your face.
okay. Um, and well, I guess I add, maybe I don't know if we answered the question. So um,
Oh, did it? How
did
did
it
it get
get
deployed?
used?
Yeah, it did. So a number of pilot programs were done. Then we had another economic recession roll along in the year starting in 2008.
Ah, yes,
So
not
for,
just any economic recession,
that was a very deep,
and
bad one. The
one
Great
that is
Recession,
probably going to repeat itself maybe sooner than later.
possibly. We've been
Um,
expecting another, haven't we? Um,
well, and what's interesting, I don't even, and again, timely. I think in the news the last couple of days is there's been some discussion about loosening the uh, the cash requirement rules on a number of the banks. Uh,
yeah. How
which
how human beings forget. It is just amazing. That's why they need experienced people like us who remember what happened before. Seriously. Intergenerational transfer of knowledge is important.
it is. Well, it is. It's hard for me. Like I have a very very hard time imagining and trying to even like I can't think of my life in any way without 9/11 in there at some point. But
Right.
it's hard to imagine, and I'm at, but I also grew up not really um experiencing the situation of the Vietnam War at home, or
Mhm.
I didn't grow up in that era. I mean, I was 3 or 4 when it was happening, but not too young to know of what was happening outside.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but so I can, but it's hard for me to. It's hard to think about people that were born just after 2001 or a couple years before, and that not having the significance on their life that it's had for the rest of us. and what their viewpoint on that is exactly. As a 20-year-old today, what do they think of 9/11 when they hear about it?
Absolutely. So I think that that's a super important thing because I feel like the lack of my generation's understanding of World War II, for example. I mean, I've studied it a lot more now, but when I was younger, I didn't care, and that's a mistake. I think not understanding history is a real deficit, and I think the current information environment saturates people in the now and the next, which is all very exciting and satisfying. But if we fast forward a little bit, one of the big problems that I would like to be working on, and I'm trying to kind of guide some of the work that I do in this direction, is the elevation of the truth and the fighting illiteracy and fighting disinformation. I think that those are serious problems that we have that have been accelerated by the media that I myself have worked on and promoted. And I think that in the next generation of this with spatial computing, people talk about the ethics. That's important. And my part of it that I'm interested in is the elevation of the truth and trying to get people to look at real data and understand it and react to it as opposed to, believing whatever is fed to them. So literacy in health and in finances and in news and all other kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to start talking about our educational system, but unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of this, well, where it could be fixed and where it
That's
stems
right.
from.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's really kind of hard to. I mean, so much of that, good, critical thinking and understanding and being able to, weed out from the noise. I think is, it's. I mean, your computer. I didn't really. I mean, I got through engineering by the skin of my teeth, and I graduated not really enjoying it, mechanical engineering, and wanting to practice it in any sort of way. But it wasn't until maybe being in the workforce for about 3, 4, or 5 years that I started to appreciate um, the problem solving skills that I was almost innately taught over 4 years of
Hmm.
difficulty that I take for granted that I don't think about consciously, but I see how when working with other people and depending on their backgrounds and education, how they approach problems differently, um, for good or for bad. I'm always, I mean, it for many years and still today, I'm just always surprised when people are trying to find or answer a question. Their first notion isn't to put the question in Google.
Hmm. Hmm.
Fortunately, and I
Hmm.
don't know why, and that is such a basic. But the ability for critical thinking is the ability to ask questions too.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of our primary and secondary education system is not designed around that.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. That's a wicked big problem. There is an opportunity. There are lots of opportunities with AI and spatial computing both to make a mark on that. But I think we have to really aim it in that direction as opposed to following the trajectories and trying to fix little gaps. It's much bigger than fixing little
well, so
gaps.
let's steer the conversation for a few minutes. We can come back to the timeline another time,
Yeah,
I think we we left off so we left off at 2008, the financial crisis.
that's right.
Just one more point on that. It's I don't know whether for you or not, but we're coming up to almost the 20th anniversary of that financial crisis, and but to me and the impact it seemed to have on the country and everybody, it still feels like it only happened 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, this was Occupy Wall Street period, and
Yeah,
I still, it's all those images are still seared in my brain.
yeah,
And But as you said, it's so quick to forget. But yeah, I mean, we're just such in a different economic period and in terms of cost of living and everything today than we were less than 25 years ago. It's really hard to see, what living, in the U.S. will look like 5, 10 years from now.
I agree that 2008 really extended a few years, that recession. It was deep and long, and there was so much joblessness in many different industries. And I think it triggered, the idea of the gig economy a little bit more. And some of the trends that we've seen later on got started then, but also this just sense of insecurity that happened then, I think has affected our country psyche deeply. I think you're right. We're still there in a way.
Well, I mean, everything that again, being able to afford a house today is next to impossible, and especially with the
Right.
way interest rates are, and I just don't, and I listen to many conversations about, how do we solve the housing crisis, and how do we bring the cost of housing down, and it is such a complicated and requires so much willpower. Well, actually, I mean, you're seeing this firsthand in Los Angeles after the fires. I mean, you're seeing
Hmm.
the bureaucracy in real time, what it's going to take to rebuild that area, and and it is so complicated. And we're just talking about rebuilding housing for people that have lost their houses, not necessarily to home new people.
Right. The 40 to 60,000 people that are unhoused already, and then the folks that lost their homes of all different income scales, and not enough construction workers to make that happen, and the bureaucracy. And there's another thing, just kind of on that subject of LA and living here and what that has done, aside from adding a lot of, I would say, fear of our own, home and landscape. It has completely flipped certain things on their head. For example, if you have a home and you have a landscape, it's suddenly kindling for a bonfire. Whereas, before January, it was, maybe beautiful palm trees and some flowers and things like that. Palm trees we're told, are the worst thing you could possibly have in your landscape because they turn into big tiki torches in a fire. So the insurance companies are suddenly looking at our houses in a different way and our landscapes in a different way. So there's a deep and profound impact.
Well, I don't know if you would. I mean, I know you're a long time person living in LA. Um, from an environmental standpoint, uh, you know that part of the country is probably an area we should have never built in to begin with. I mean, that along with other cities in the West, including Phoenix and Las Vegas. But the amount of water that's had to be diverted from the Colorado
Mm.
River to that region, it is. I don't. I mean, maybe it's just I see huge desalinization plants in our future on the West Coast.
Yeah, yeah, that's another mega problem to solve.
Um, anyway, where I wanted to steer uh, the conversation, and maybe towards a way to wrap up for today. But so let's talk about the state of AI today. And I don't know how much time or energy you've been spending on focusing on it. And I segueing to this because we were talking about like what does things 5 to 10 years look from now, and we were also talking about how could education look different or be different. And I am reading bits here and there on how students today are learning very differently with AI. And it seems it's very clear though that the teaching side of it is not able to keep up with how kids are learning on their own at all age levels. Even, and I can even speak to this at teaching at a college level, is it's completely unclear to me how the students are using chat gpt or other forms to do their
Mm.
homework or do other things. But I'll hand it to you for a second to just what are your thoughts on where we are today with AI? What are your hopes and concerns, and where do you see the opportunities?
Those are a lot of there's a lot to that, Bob. Uh,
And you have
um,
you have 30 seconds. No,
at
no, I'm
30
just
seconds, right?
no.
Yeah. I think, it's having impact on everything. It is kind of like the wave that the internet caused, only much larger, because it's closer to us, it's closer to our, emulating the way that it appears to emulate the way that humans think, although the way it's actually working is, somewhat different. And I think, if you I do tend to break it down by, what are the problems and what will the impact be on those problems. Um, Two of my areas of interest are healthcare and then education, maybe secondarily for me. And on the education front, I think you're talking about, I think that it's going to completely change the paradigm for education, or there's an opportunity to do that. And there's an opportunity to do that in a positive way. I'm not an educator professionally, so the details are fuzzy for me, but I can imagine a world in which, um, especially for young students, they are learning primarily from an AI delivered, chatbot sort of teacher that has the entire world of digital information at their fingertips and can help adapt the education to the child or the individual and help them to learn what they need to learn.
Can I,
Um,
let me ask you a question because you're one of the few people I know with a very very deep computer science background, and who learned how to do things with assembly language,
right.
um, and because this question plays into a little bit on where where does AI go, and where do we use it for some of these applications we're talking about. But from your understanding, and again, I don't know how much time you've maybe spent trying to understand the current research and how things and how the large language models are working. But do you think AGI is everything that everyone is raising so much money towards? I mean, just the headline today. Zuckerberg steals three people away from OpenAI. Um, that that is something that we are going to achieve, that will be achieved, and or is it something that is a hyped up pipe dream that either they've all drunk the Kool-Aid and think we're going to get to this computer system that is going to be able to think and invent on its own, or are we just going to have a highly glorified um, knowledge transfer platform?
Well, I'm not going to try to second guess or supersede, the people that work on this full time, the AI researchers. And I think we see people on both sides of the question that say the answer is yes, the answer is no. So I think the real answer is that nobody actually knows, or people think they know, but I don't think we really know. And I do think that what actually will happen is somewhat mitigated by what politicians and businesses decide to do with it. I regret that it's not human centered and not problem driven. If I could, be queen of the world, I would say, can we focus on some things that we want to solve? Can we have AI that solves things that we want to do as opposed to what it can do? So I do think that that is kind of off. But given what is actually happening, I think there are limits to the current technology in the language models. They need to feed on previous patterns. Now, I can imagine combining them with expert systems that might give them a semblance of creativity. So I'm not one of the people that says it will never do X, Y, Z. I think there is no never here. I don't think there's a theoretical limit to what it can do, but there will be, computational and business and political limits, right? And I think that, what we're seeing it do amazingly right now is adapt lots of patterns of thinking that are pretty good, and they're good for a lot of things. So I think the big disruption is just absorbing what we have now, and it will leapfrog up to a point. But I think there's a limit to what the current, kind of pattern imitating technologies will be able to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how quickly the AI models hallucinate, at least from a software development standpoint. And I don't know if this again, and I don't know enough about the underlying back ends on how they're designed to work, but you can't get very far in using AI as a programmer unless it's given really really small discrete chunks of things to work on. Because if you give it just a little bit too much, it just starts to go in any direction, and not solve the task at hand. I don't know if that's any indication of I don't know why that is. I guess it's unclear to me. What I don't understand is what what is happening on the back end that helps decrease that hallucination, and why is it happening to begin with? So
Hmm.
that's and I'm sure there's some research and papers out there, but that's where I'm kind of trying to understand the underlying mechanics.
Yeah, I don't think I can cover that, but I do in terms
Oh,
of
I thought you had the answer for me.
I want to go back to I would like to talk about that a little bit. I think that the hallucinations obviously come again with this. In my mind, it's trying to fit a pattern. Yeah, I mean, just in a very simple language, it's fitting a pattern. If there's a piece missing in the pattern, and it comes from the wrong place, that's a hallucination. They fill it with the wrong piece of information, but it fits the pattern. So as far as it's concerned, it's done the right thing. But you tell it that was wrong, then it will say, okay, there was a mistake in my pattern. So now I'm going to improve it the next time around. So it's a constantly iterating, improving kind of thing.
So technically, with time and repeated training and learning of, from a theoretical standpoint, then it shouldn't be, we can understand then how the systems can get to a point of uh, being much much better at repeating patterns, or fitting the pattern, over
Assuming they're getting that constant training and
over a
almost
long period of time.
with millions of people.
Right. I don't know. I don't understand where the idea of, and I think one of the definitions for people coming up with the AGI is the ability for the AI to build something novel, to have a new unique creative idea that's not based on something that's already been discussed or written or researched. And so that's yeah. I mean
Well,
that's a,
there are the other AI techniques that can be combined with this pattern matching, right? There's inference, there's there could be structures of creativity that are built that it can emulate. So I can imagine that stuff being built and being successful.
so
But another question you asked was is this stuff everything we think it is right now? And I think the answer is no, it's not. And I think for even for business, there are businesses that are using it to great effect. But I think there also are huge investments that have been made that are not yet paying
that
off.
because people were scared and feel like they need to start investing so they don't get behind. But
Scared and
once
inspired. I
once you
mean,
get
I mean,
we
it's
what's
not
that?
just fear. It's not just fear. It's also, wow, if I could take advantage of that in my business, that's going to be huge. So I think there are businesses where they're seeing the results of that. There are jobs that are being disrupted or potentially disrupted. There are companies that have laid off people in anticipation of the benefits before they actually got them. So there's all this mix of things going on. But I think with every technology, you don't just put it in there and it works, right? It has to be integrated into workflows and has to be supported by the company. There's just a lot of things that have to happen before you have full productivity.
So if you had the power to have your the dream job or the dream project that you could start working on tomorrow, VR related, AI related, military related, healthcare, combination of all, is there something specific that you would love to start putting more time into to try to help solve or come up or find a solution for?
Yeah, I think one of the themes that I've been thinking about, and I gave a paper about that at your conference, IVRA, was this idea of the hero's journey in healthcare, and that's kind of a buzzwordy way to say it, but the idea that the individual can make a big impact on their own outcomes in healthcare, but tied to something I talked about earlier, there's also a lot of illiteracy, health illiteracy in our country and in the world. So, how can you be a good advocate for your own health if you don't understand the data that you're seeing, if you don't understand the impact of pills or vaccines or food? There's stuff we don't know, but there's stuff we do know that people just don't accept or don't understand. So, the combination of those two things, combating the health illiteracy and using the new immersive and AI technologies to help people advocate for and participate more in better outcomes for themselves. Those are things I want to work on. That sounds very abstract, but in my talk,
No,
we did cite some examples of where patient education and mental therapy and even physical therapy can be realized in a 3D kind of environment that really helps you to move along in your path.
I don't know whether to go in this direction or not. I wanted to ask, if you have no comment, say no comment. But um, trying to be as um, unbiased as possible, and just looking at what's coming out and what's being said. I do see, at least from my perspective, I'm not saying he has everything right, um, but RFK is kind of trying to approach healthcare, at least in the United States, from that perspective, and from people taking better care of their own health and being better educated. Do you see that, or do you think he's making a complete mess of the system versus trying to reinvent it?
I think both of those things are going on. Honestly, I think some of the stated objectives, of Maha are, I can really get behind them. I agree with people being better educated. I agree with people eating better food. I agree with using natural remedies where they make sense. What I don't agree with is abandoning the 100 years worth of research, data based healthcare that we have. To abandon that is tragic. I mean, people will die because of that, and people will be ill. Let's just take what's going on with measles right now. Whatever you think about vaccines, they can prevent people from getting measles. And I was reading the other day an article about little children in Texas, the ones who didn't die, but they got really, really ill. It's a terrible illness. Why put them through that? So I feel strongly about science, data, repeatability. That's what science has brought to us. And I feel abandoning science is going back to the Middle Ages. So, yes, let's take more responsibility, but let's also have science literacy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not nowhere near, an expert, even highly educated on autism, but it does seem like the it's the same problem with you know Ritalin or any other half dozen drugs that have been overly prescribed, or um, people, I don't it we just the number of people that are diagnosed with autism has like gone off the scale from 20, 25 years ago.
That's
And
right.
is that because physicians or psychologists or psychiatrists have lowered the bar on how they assess, and how they decide? That's what seems really unclear on why those numbers have increased or not, and that it has nothing to do with vaccines. Um, I can understand, and I can put myself in the people's shoes of those that have concern about it and who's children have high autism and feel like maybe it was related to vaccines. Um, you know, I mean, I do well. I mean, COVID's a whole separate discussion. Let's not go down that road right now. But I think the way we managed it as a rollout in the United States, I don't think was to the benefit of the entire nation.
Yeah,
um,
it's an interesting thing. I think that some people get confused that science, knows the truth. And I really think science is about discovering the truth, and there's always more to discover. We never know everything. And so that's part of the, I think, challenge is helping all of us, including myself, understand that, okay, this is a fact that we know of today based on science, but it could change when we discover even more. And I think a great example of that is, um, in the food area. That information continues to change as we get more research. Maybe 40 years ago, it was a good idea to eat margarine. That was going to help you with your
right,
heart, and that was
right,
hydrogenated, you know, hydrogenated oil, which we've now found is really deadly for your heart. And now then the advice becomes, well, eat butter or eat, unsaturated fats. It has, and this is part of what has confused people. And we need to help everyone understand that science is going to tell us what we know today, but we also can find out later on that maybe some of these things were wrong or incomplete.
well, and this is the problem with the misinformation, and I think it's I mean, the devil is really in the very, very minute details. I mean, I think when we start looking at these things, you can't you can easily uh, overestimate or assume that based on factor A, B, and C that this is the reason for this happening. But then you have to go into factor A, B, and C and look at factors 1, 2, and 3 of factor A.
Yeah.
There are so many small things, and then without any proper studies or and I do think there's been a I hope one of the things he's able to help clean up is um, the too much mixing of uh, pharmaceutical companies and others influencing studies and being involved in that. There is a lot of corruption there that needs to be filtered out, because then you can't, how can you trust the data that's being developed? I mean, there's the whole thing back to smoking and nicotine and all those studies being hidden, and you, you know um I'm I
What's
don't
the
think I'm
distribution of that information, right? How can you make a good decision if you don't have access to it? So that is definitely part of the whole system that has to
well.
be addressed.
And even there was a really great documentary the other. I mean, this is not healthcare related, but I mean, but this goes back. I mean, I guess as professional engineers or computer scientists, and when you think about these things, the Grenfell Tower in London that burned and highly attributed to the cladding that was used, and that
Mm.
and directly associated with um, uh, aluminum. I think, and the one of the companies that was spun off by I forget the name of the major aluminum company, but the sub company was called Arconics, and makes this cladding. And there's a material that's used to um, stick the aluminum together that's flammable. And them finding, and the data and the emails are there within the company, and they can pinpoint it to 1 or 2 people that decide not to say anything. And but over time, and that suppressed information, because it would have a negative impact on the company's numbers, um, and deciding not to, and that, I mean, that leads to the problems that happen today, and the burning of, and there are hundreds of these buildings, throughout the world with this problem, and nothing being done to repair them. I mean, they're just, flammable hazards waiting to happen. Um,
Sort of like an
anyway,
LA landscape.
yeah, yeah. No, again, nothing to do with healthcare, but just trying to illustrate how important information is, data, and
Yes.
data that is often known, but then if it's not the right data, or if it doesn't fit your story or the story that you
Right.
want, and you suppress it,
Right.
that is how we get the mess that we have everywhere today.
Well, I think there's, Bob, another part of this is that things have become very complex in our modern lives. And I do think that that's, if we go back to what problems do we want AI to solve, I think that for me is one of them. How do I navigate the knowledge of the world to get to the truth that I am seeking? And so I think that some of that, pattern based canonized knowledge, it's already working in search engines, right? But if it's connected to scientific data and business data as well, it could really help people with their decision making in their lives, to be factual.
Well, it would be actually yes. I think where AI could be helping. Maybe there's an opportunity to build a system like this, where because the problem about talking about what's the truth of the data is, the truth is is the author that makes it, but
Uh-huh.
then it all comes down to the reliability and the reputation of the author,
Hmm.
or the companies involved and in producing the data or the study, and who's behind it. So, but where AI could help is trying to is identifying where there are inconsistencies among the reputations or reliabilities of those sources. That I mean, it all comes down to which source do you trust, and that source is based on their own background and experience, and what they've done in the past, and is it reliable?
Right. And for 2025, the advice is question the answer.
Yeah, well, that should always be the well. But this goes back to again, if unless we well, this again, I think almost all of our ills could be solved with proper education
Hmm.
of people growing up, because if you teach that um, uh, critical thinking, questioning method early, it the rest can take care of itself. but
Right.
once people are set in their ways, or just think and learn in a different manner, it's really really hard to change that.
And earlier
Just
on,
like
there's
it's
just
hard to
some
change habits.
basics.
What's that?
There's some basics too, though, just learning to read. The average American, I think, has an eighth grade reading level.
Yeah, that's hard to imagine. That's just hard to
Why is
even
that?
comprehend. I don't know. I don't know where those numbers come. Well, I mean, why is it? Is I mean, there's probably a hundred reasons, um, but you would think that these would be the most important issues that our electorate and our politicians would worry about. But again, I mean, it's all the same. I mean, I'm sorry, not to be being a pessimist, but it's the same problem with our national debt, and everyone is focused on the short term, and they'll be long dead by the time someone has to deal with it. So
Right. And there's many reasons I didn't go into politics. So my lens is what can technology do? You know,
yeah, yeah, and again, it depends on who the programmer is,
Who
right?
has it? It can
It
do
so
damage.
the programmer can be in charge of what the truth looks like. So
That's
you then
right.
you've got to question the reliability of the programmer and their
That's right.
intention. And that's why, well, and I think that's why we have so many concern. I mean, you also, well, yeah, big tech now has a little too much influence and sway over popular opinion,
Hmm. AKA the truth.
aka the truth. So I think let's end on that note,
Okay.
which is neither a bad or good note, but somewhat stayed indifferent. But Laura, I thank you so much for your time. We did not get to some other areas of discussion, let alone our current state of virtual reality, and we didn't talk about what we thought of AWE the other week. So there is plenty more for us to discuss. Um, and maybe we bring somebody else into discussion, or we'll just have a part two. But thank you so much for your time. And I've learned a lot about you that I did not know before. just as I have with others through this process. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, Bob, thank you for sticking with this and being a patient listener and being interested. That's rare when people, really look into your backgrounds. So I appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing what happens with all this material.
Laura, thank you.
Okay. All right. Goodbye.